What's up guys, my name is Marc Steiner, and today we are going to be reviewing the Sony 24-70 GM Mark II. Let's get right into it. This is one of Sony's best and most important lenses, and with that comes the latest and greatest feature set as well as a hefty price tag. So, what do you get for your money? You get top-notch quality and complete weather sealing, rubber gasket and all on the back, meaning that this can handle any environmental situation. You name it, this thing can handle it. I myself have taken this lens out in the pouring rain and it just shrugged it off like it was nothing, and it just gave me peace of mind, and I love that. The lens features a nice manual focus ring which is well dampened. I personally would have preferred a tad bit more resistance, but it is smooth and very capable of being used to pull focus by hand with no problem. It features not only one, but two custom function buttons on the lens, so you can have access to them in both horizontal and vertical orientations. Very nice touch. And of course, we have the AF/MF switch on the left side as usual. The declickable aperture ring makes its debut on the 24-70, putting it in line with the vast majority of Sony's newer lenses, which have all had this feature for a while. But unlike other lenses, this one features an iris lock, which is very welcome. Never again will you accidentally bump your aperture from A to f/22, and you can lock it as you see fit. Speaking of locking, we have another new switch on this lens which changes how much resistance there is while zooming. Flick the switch to tight and you'll have a very slow and steady and much harder time zooming in and out. Flick it to smooth and you'll have the more traditional, little to no resistance zoom. Personally, I wish there was kind of an in-between mode between these two. Initially, I never thought I'd use the smooth mode on this lens, but after using it out in the real world, I found that I actually prefer smooth when it comes to photos and quick snaps in and out, and then using the tight mode when it comes to more video work, either locking it off on a tripod, some handheld zooming in and out, and then locking it off for when I stow it away, or I just hold it in my hand but not use it. The minimum focusing distance of this lens is 21 centimeters or 8.3 inches for my American friends, and honestly this is very impressive, and you're going to see some evidence of that in video very shortly. Here's the minimum focusing distance with this lens at 24 millimeters, 35 millimeters, 50 millimeters, and 70 millimeters. As you can tell, the minimum focusing distance is actually quite impressive and is very, very useful. This lens features a very large 82mm filter thread, which in my mind is very unnecessary, especially looking at the body of this lens. I don't think they needed to make the lens filter this large, but because this is a professional grade lens and it has a precedent of having this 82mm filter thread, I think Sony decided to just keep it the same as they always have to not annoy working professionals who have already invested in 82mm filters. This lens weighs in at 695 grams, which is honestly noticeably heavier than my prime lenses. However, compared to the previous generation 24-70, it is noticeably lighter, and for a lens of this caliber, it's actually very small, light, and compact, and I absolutely love that. The lens also comes with a brand new lens hood, which features the window for filters, always a nice touch, and of course, in GM fashion, it comes with its own protective case. Now onto the photo IAF test. This thing sticks to the eyes like glue, and honestly is the best and most reliable lens with the fastest autofocus I have ever had the pleasure of using. For photos, this thing is guaranteed to get even the toughest of shots in focus, and I have an extremely high hit rate. I can fully rely on this lens when it comes to photography AF, especially with the newer Sony bodies. But even on my older A7R III, this thing still works like a charm. On to the video AF test. We know that Sony has been king of autofocus for a while, but this truly feels like a step forward. With this lens's lack of focus breathing, it feels truly cinematic as it tracks subjects in the frame. At 24mm, this lens tracks me very well. As I run towards the camera, it tracks me flawlessly, even up to minimum focusing distance. As I drop down out of frame, the lens continues to hold focus on where I last was, keeping the background perfectly blurry. And as I pop back into frame, the lens immediately catches my eye in focus and keeps me in focus until I drop out of frame again. As I come back into frame, there is an ever so slight moment where I am not in focus, but that is quickly rectified and I'm locked on by the time I hit the center of the frame. Same thing happens again when I jump back into frame. While I backpedal, I stay in focus the entire way. And as I run towards the camera, I am in focus the entire time, even as I obnoxiously get towards minimum focusing distance with my eye. There seems to be a slight delay when going from tight headshot to just my eye, but that is reasonable considering the lack of light and how close my eye is getting to the frame. It is crazy how close you can get even at 24mm and still be in focus. Moving on to a medium shot at 48mm, I am tack sharp the entire way as I backpedal, and being a tighter shot than the wide of the 24, you start to see the better background separation, blur, bokeh, and focus pulling and lack of focus breathing as I move about the frame. I stay in focus the entire way while running back, and I particularly love how this lens breathes so little with the background staying the same. It's just so smooth and refreshing to witness. As I pop down out of frame and then come back up, the lens holds focus and it's like I never even left the frame. At this point, these tests feel like they're getting a little redundant, so I'm not going to put you through the entire run, but I stay in focus as I pop back into frame and as I backpedal away. As I run towards the camera, this is the first time I feel like I am slightly out of focus, but after a step or so, my face is large enough in the frame for the IAF to kick in, and I am instantly in focus the entire way back, even as I get obnoxiously close and break past the minimum focusing distance, so you can see just how close this lens is able to focus. Now on to 70mm, and damn, look at that bokeh and compression. This lens is clean, and at this longer focal length, I'm staying in focus, separated from the background the entire time. The tracking is just so freaking smooth. This is at 120 frames per second, which really shows the breathing and focus stepping of a lens, and this feels so smooth. No awkward jumps, no bad breathing, just perfection. It really feels like a cinema lens. Again, I come down and back up into frame, and the focus holds perfectly, and I am instantly back in focus when I come back up, tack sharp. When I move out of frame, I clearly stay out of the frame long enough for the focus hold to stop, and it focuses on the background, and you can see just how smooth of a full rack comes out of this lens. As I pop back down, same thing, flawless focus. As I backpedal, perfect focus. And then the final run towards the camera, in focus the entire time. There's only a slight hesitation when I start to go from more tight framing to absolute minimum focusing distance on the long end, just of my eye. And again, I think this is absolutely respectable, because look how close my eye is, and how is it still in focus, tack sharp. The minimum focusing distance on this thing is so great, and it allows for more creative shots that I thought previously might require a macro lens to achieve. Bravo, Sony. Now, all of those autofocus tests were shot at 120 frames per second, and this is by far the best performing lens I've ever tested. If it looks that flawless at 120 frames per second, there is no way you're gonna see anything at 60 or 24 frames per second. And this was shot at 24 frames per second. It looks so smooth and clean the entire way. It feels like I have a Hollywood focus puller working my scene. My model walks straight towards the camera in various lighting situations, and it sticks to the eye the entire time, and the background just continues to get blurrier and blurrier with no jumps or steps, just pure, smooth bokeh. When she walks out of frame, it even holds, not jumping to the background, making it truly feel like someone was actually pulling focus. On this shot right here, we had one take, and I said if it doesn't work, so be it. But look at this. All autofocus, panning with the gimbal, focusing on the tram, and then the cinematic rack to the model, flawlessly, as if planned. It just works. Since I had to worry about oncoming traffic, as well as operating the gimbal and trying to keep my model in frame, I had to rely completely on the AF to just do its thing and hope it worked, and damn, did it work. Now onto some photo samples. I have left a link in the description to some raw files so you can download them and pixel peep and check them out for yourself. This lens is sharp throughout the frame all the way to the edges, performing very well with minimal distortion of any kind. Look at the detail on the building when we zoom in to 300%. There's just so much detail in the frame. On this shot here, you can see how busy the building is, but when we punch into 170%, you can see clearly the blinds in the windows and even make out the striations on the filters of the air conditioners outside. If we move down the frame and zoom into 550%, you can basically make out the words on the posters. Let's zoom back out so you can appreciate the detail here. The bokeh of this lens is very clean and circular, with it being slightly more oval shaped at the edges of the frame. I think this is very pleasing to the eye. There's a tad bit of chromatic aberration, but it is negligible in my opinion. I don't think you can even see it on this photo on YouTube, but on my laptop there is a little bit on the Canon badge. I don't think this is an issue at all, as it can be easily removed in post for photos and doesn't really show up in video, but it can be remedied in video to a lesser extent. I just love how I'm able to capture so many different kinds of things with this lens. It just works in so many situations. Portraits, landscapes, architecture, street photography. It just does it all so well. This lens is absolutely incredible. I was really hoping for an internal 24-70, but alas, I guess that's just a limitation of the form factor and the focal range. This thing is sharp, has minimal focus breathing, and you can rely on it. And since I have bought it, it has stayed on one of my camera bodies the entire time. I've always been a prime guy, and this was my first ever zoom purchase. I've always loved the quality and the wider aperture that primes offer, but having something this versatile is just so helpful. And as a working professional, it accomplishes everything I need with flying colors. I know when I show up to a client shoot with this lens, I'll be able to cover everything they could possibly need because this lens is just so versatile. Normally for my YouTube videos or for my model videos where I have complete control over a situation and I know exactly what the artistic vibe I want is, I have no problem using primes because I have that luxury of taking multiple takes and taking my time and seeing how the lighting works and whatnot. But when you're on a professional job and someone is relying on you to get the job done in a timely manner, in a professional manner, you don't always have that luxury. You're showing up to locations and you have no idea what the lighting situation is like. You have no idea what the location is like. You have no idea if they want tight, wide, medium, what kind of shots they want. And with this lens, it's peace of mind. You don't need to worry whether or not you brought all 4 of your primes. This is the lens you need to get everything done, and a client will be very happy with what you get out of this lens. So what's my final opinion on this lens? This lens is an absolute beauty, but is it worth its $2,300 price tag? That's for you to decide. Personally, I feel like the price tag is warranted by the performance. However, is it a good bang for buck? Not when the Sigma 24-70 exists for about half the price, and not when these slightly different focal length lenses exist. Both from Tamron and Sigma, they have the 28-75, and they come in much cheaper with very good performance. There's even the Tamron 35-150 lens, which is arguably more versatile. And those lenses are an insanely good bang for buck. But if you want a really good lens, you want all the bells and whistles, all the coatings, all the weather sealing, you want a lens that you know is going to grow with you as you exchange bodies, you want a lens that's going to last over a decade, this is very hard to beat. And I think that this lens is one of the best lenses in Sony's lineup. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section down below. My name is Marc Steiner, and I'll see you next time.